Hi, I'm Judy Farrell and this is the Chai Sessions, my podcast for Merchant City Yoga, where I talk with yoga pals old and new, trying to understand better what it is we're doing when we practice yoga and why we do it. In this edition of the Chai Sessions, I'm talking to friend and fellow Ashtanga teacher Scott Johnson. This is our fourth conversation together, so I feel we can now say he's a regular here on the podcast. Now, for many of you, he needs no introduction. But for those of you who haven't met Scott yet, he's been practising yoga since 1998 and teaching Ashtanga yoga since 2004. He's been the director and senior teacher at Stillpoint Yoga London since it was founded in 2009. And Scott's teaching integrates the practice of yoga and embodied mindfulness. He teaches this mindful approach to Ashtanga yoga nationally and internationally, and he's been visiting us here at MCY since way back in 2018. I start our conversation by asking Scott about a recent Instagram reel he posted that went off the charts in terms of response. It led with the bold words, "This is how Ashtanga works." We chat about how we talk about what it is that we do, what we choose to share and why, and about Scott's personal approach to both social posts and teaching Ashtanga, where he encourages people to stop and think about what's behind making the shapes of the postures. Scott shares his love-hate relationship with social media and how creativity is key for him. We talk about the purpose and outcomes of practising yoga, and Scott says that his own yoga practice helps him connect more with himself, fosters becoming a better person in the world, and gives him the confidence to be able to say, "This is what's meaningful to me." We talk about the power of words, the way we share, and the apparent contradiction of relationship and intimacy within the Ashtanga practice and understanding and respecting the space between us. He suggests that our yoga practice becomes about the experience of movement and stillness and presence, rather than how the posture is looking in a certain shape. Scott says, "This is how Ashtanga yoga works. For me at that moment was to say, it helps you over time to become still. And it's true. That's the heart of yoga, the heart of it all. Yoga wants us to be able to find something within us that's still, away from all the stuff that turns." I don't think I needed to worry about running out of conversation with Scott. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. So Scott, thank you very much for joining me once again on the Chai Sessions. I am here with my trusty cuppa, and I feel that you don't need an introduction anymore because you're such a regular here with me on these conversations. So I'm really grateful that you found the time to join me again. So thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure, Judy,
to
come on the Chai Sessions and see what else we can, the other conversations we can muster.
Yeah, I mean, before we hit record today, he'd asked me what we were going to talk about, and I was like, I don't think we've ever ran out of anything to chat about so far. So I don't think today is going to be the day. So to open, I thought we could talk about an Instagram post that you did a few weeks ago. It caught my eye because, so the question it poses is quite a big question, but also the response you got was phenomenal. You know, in terms of like the thumbs and all the rest of it. And it was the reel that you posted about saying, "This is how Ashtanga yoga works." And I thought maybe we could start by telling us a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, this is one way Ashtanga yoga works, but it's a very useful way. You know, as you and I both know, Instagram is this kind of minefield of of conversations and sharing and information. And so, you know, as you know, being a studio owner and trying to like, you know, tell a story, we're trying to find different ways to engage. And I think, you know, for me, over the last number of years, I've been kind of exploring words and ideas and poetry and stuff like that. And this particular post was just like, I've got these nice videos, which I always try and capture some, like, not just yoga videos, but me doing poses, but, you know, I'm a kind of amateur photographer and I like creating films. And so I like when I'm taking footage to um, make it look nice. And so I'm often kind of just filming things and filming the shape of, rather than an asana, filming the shape of something. And so what for me, what's important for me has always been for me is that we're not, when I'm telling people about the things that we do or the things that I share, that I'm a yoga teacher, that it's not obvious. I'm not one of those teachers who shares how long I can hold a handstand for, or how I can, you know, how I can do techniques to do this and to do that. I far more
Yeah.
kind of, if I do stuff around postures and move, it's more to do with movement, and I try and make things look like um, look like they're thoughtful, right? But it's always to do with music, you know, and to try and present music and words and to make somewhere people stop and think a little bit deeper. And so that particular post was me working on an idea that I'd seen someone else come up with somewhere else and said, if you try this, you might like, you know, you might get traction. So I thought I'd use this footage I was like that I had in Goa from teaching last year. Really, there was some incredible light in the Shala in Goa, and I was just like, as a, you know, as an amateur photographer and someone who creates little films, I'm just like playing with light, and it was gorgeous. And so I had this really like kind of pretty light, and when I'm creating anything, I always try and see if I can merge the way that the feel of the footage that I've got with the words and the sentiment of something. And so for me, like a bold statement saying this is how Ashtanga yoga works for me at this moment was to say it helps you over time to become still. And it's true. That's what yoga wants us in the heart of yoga, the heart of all yoga. It wants us to be able to find something within us that's still away from all this stuff that turns. And so the I just got these words that came and put them in relationship to the, you know, the video footage went from being mobile to being still, and so along with the music. So I think it was kind of it hit a nerve because I found the perfect balance between kind of like um the the sentiment I was trying to create, the imagery, and the music. But to a certain degree, you know, that's me, right? You know, me as a teacher, I'm often trying to get people to look a little bit underneath what they think they feel they're trying to do, to soften, to kind of take like the aggression out or the energy out of something, and go, what's behind this experience of trying to create a shape or trying to do a certain thing within Ashtanga. And so what we want to do is when we get to the end, we always go to the end of the practice and Shavasana, how still are you? How still is this practice made you? So rather than say, Ashtanga is this and Ashtanga is that, you know, it is just another pathway to help us to understand how we can become quiet within ourselves. So the post, I was shocked. I was like, wow, this is going somewhere. And it's the kind of like,
Yeah.
I've had kind of like posts that have gone kind of a bit mad before, but they've always been connected to either David Swinton or Petrie or Tyler or one of those people. But this is the first one I posted that kind of got a life of its own of something that I'd created. So it was nice. It was like, I'm glad you noticed that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's definitely something as teachers, and it, how do we talk about what we do? Like what do we say when someone hasn't experienced it? You know, and it's not to kind of oversimplify it by saying this is how it works, because obviously it works in many
Yeah,
different ways, many different people
yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
many different days. But like I say, from someone who's constantly trying to encourage people to come to this style and give it a go, and the people who are practicing for a little while now and they want to understand more about what's happening and how it feels like it's working. And the other thing about it was just so very you. You know, I don't think it would have, like, having practiced with you, like any number of times now, like I don't think it would have struck quite such a chord applying it to any other teacher. So I think, like you say, it
Yeah.
was lots of different strands that and a little bit of magical fairy dust there. Um, like that. But there's definitely something in it, isn't there, about how we communicate and how we talk about what it is that we do and what some of what we hope for people when they come and join us.
I think what we're trying to do all the time, and we're talking about social media, it's kind of like, I have this love hate with it, where I get really inspired to do stuff, and I get really kind of quite shy because I'm not feeling very creative, even though I am quite
Yeah,
creative. And the interesting thing for me is like I'm always fascinated by the outcome of what people's practice leads to,
yeah,
right? And so, you know, is are we practicing yoga to achieve enlightenment? Are we practicing yoga to achieve samadhi? I've been speaking to a lot of like senior teachers and like in the tradition over the last couple of weeks, and one of them, two of them were talking about what, initially I spoke to Alex Medine, I spoke to Hamish, and both of them said different things. Hamish said, "Well, yoga is for samadhi," and
right.
Alex Medine said, "Well, yoga is so we can be a better person in the world." And both of those things can be true. Hamish is
Yeah,
right to a certain degree. If we following
yes,
the classical version of yoga, then samadhi is the outcome. But the outcome of that is you become a better person in the world, right? But I was going to go, well, am I? Maybe some form of enlightenment is me feeling more like I'm connected to a version of myself um, that I'm comfortable with. And whenever I connect to a version of myself that I'm comfortable with, it means I can put myself into the world and not be scared or not have fear. Um, so for me, that's like, I think the outcome of all of my years of practice have helped me to be able to find a voice, to be able to share in a way that's unique to me and I feel comfortable with. And that with that outcome is the way it's a form of creation of myself into the world. And my creation of myself into the world has been, the way I particularly teach and feeling really comfortable and grounded in that perspective, in teaching Ashtanga yoga in a more mindful, thoughtful way, but also the ability to share words and be confident in the way I create things and put it out and the way I feel like the way I share is kind of like you said, is connected to the nature of how I see the world, how I see teaching, how I see practice. So
yeah,
I haven't got to that. I've got to that place of being able to share in a way that's like that, feel confident because of practice, because practice has helped me to see and bolden and empower this side of me. And for me, that's like if I'm doing anything as a teacher, it's encouraging people to be bolder about how they put themselves out into the world. Which is why like I write poetry, which is why I'm trying to express yoga through me in a way that's not obvious. To not go,
right.
here's a yoga pose. like Mark Roberts is doing amazing things at the moment. He's doing this very great face to camera thing, saying this is I'm a
Yeah.
yoga teacher. You know, it's a bit like Adam and people like that. But I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not going to do that because he's doing it. Do you know what I mean? And like they're
Yeah.
doing it. So what is the story that I want to tell? What is the part of yoga that's meaningful to me that maybe someone might listen to or connect to and go, oh, he's coming across okay. And so for me, it's always been about the philosophy has always felt really deep and how the philosophy impacts the way that I then act and move and stuff like that. And so, you know, being able to write about or kind of play with words around the philosophical understanding of the thing that we do, which we all know it's leading us to, is the point for me.
Yeah.
My classes and my like this retreat I'm teaching at the moment. I'm in Purple Valley in Tenerife, and we are over halfway through a 6-day journey of
Yeah.
like I've taken like for an hour and 15 minutes every morning. People have started on Sunday, they're finishing on Friday, and on Friday they didn't know the practices they were doing over those hour and 15 minutes, and I was guiding them through. Tomorrow they'll be doing it in complete silence, and all I'll do is ring a bell, and then they'll know what to
Right.
do next. So what I'm doing is I'm encouraging people to go in, so that when they go in really deep, then they practice their Ashtanga, and then they can begin to feel and experience their Ashtanga practice in this new place, from this space of stillness. So from that place of stillness, we've been talking in the afternoon, some of the philosophy class in the afternoon, about what does that then mean about how we live and move in the world? What does it do? What does it do about how does us becoming still and comfortable within ourselves there help us to be better people or be more enlightened in the world? And it's down to each person to understand what that means. But for me, the confidence to be able to say, this is what's meaningful to me. This is what I feel is really important about the thing that we do, which is this Ashtanga yoga, the thing that I've done, which is Ashtanga yoga. This is what it's given me.
Yeah.
And then to be able to present it in a way using music, using video, kind of like to try and craft something. I've got this kind of, I've got this kind of, you know, theory, you know, that we were talking about it again yesterday. I talk about how like yoga is and trying to come undercover our unique true nature of our combined human nature. So we're trying to uncover, if you got out of your own way, what would be the story you'd tell about the world of yourself? And if you didn't care,
Yeah. If there was
and
no,
if you weren't, what would be the story? What would be the way that your uniqueness would present itself to other people if you could share something? Because I believe we all have that. This idea that we're born artists, we're born creative, but we cover it up with like the things that we're supposed to learn at school and the things that we're kind of like, um, you know, the work that we then do, and then we have to get a job, and then we have to do all these things. But it's
yeah.
covering up this innate sensitivity of your place in the center, or your unique place at the center of your life in this incredible experience. What if you let go of the things that stopped it? Would you share? And
Yeah. If
that
there
for
was
me,
no,
once I've realized that, I'm going, this is like what's my unique creativity? What's the way that I feel comfortable? What's what you know, it's like that idea of flow. If I got
yeah.
out of the way, what flows from me?
Yeah.
What is waiting to just come? And it's almost like I've been over the last number of years really trying to tap in to get out of like, this is why in the beginning of 2020 I started writing poetry and putting it on Instagram, because I could write poetry and it could stay in my book, or I could write poetry and put it out into the world and see what happens. And that was bold
Yeah.
for
And
me. For me, but
Yeah.
it gave me such a power of feeling like I've got something to share that's not obvious, but also can quite land quite nicely. And like you said, make it about uniquely. Oh, that's Scott's post.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't have been anyone else. I want to pick up maybe on a couple of things there. Well, I want to pick up on hundreds of things there, but I appreciate we only have a short period of time. So the first thing was um coming back to what you were saying there, how all of that, having the confidence to share and having the clarity to know what it is you want to share and how to share it and use your words all comes very directly from your own practice.
Yeah,
Like I love that in this age of information is everywhere. Like we can read, we can listen, we can find all the information about anything we could ever want to know. But actually to have it change us, we need to do. Like
yeah. And that's the
um
thing, the important thing. Like we started, like I started practicing 23 years ago now, and I watched how immediately it changed me. I was like, that compelled me. And I watched how having my teacher over the years changed me, and that compelled me. And I watched it change me for the better. I watched it change me for not such a good way. And then in between that, but I watched it change me. Um, and it was not just because I did my physical practice, but I had really amazing philosophy teachers, and I had really
mhm,
amazing friends I were able to spend years and years and years, really dear friends, just talking and wrestling with ideas, and then wrestling
yeah,
with these ideas in relationship to my life. And so, as a response to my practice, before I practiced, before like 25 years ago, I was a completely different beast than I am now. I'm still got some of the same kind of like stuff going on, but I'm more equipped. I feel more equipped to be able to deal with it, which is kind of like what yoga helps you to do, to find an essence of yourself. I mean, there's a maturity that helps you to find within yourself, but a maturity more in relationship to an understanding of who you are behind the thoughts that you think you are.
yeah,
Um, but I think this is again this week. I'm teaching these people. I'm teaching the people here about how watching how they change over a week, just by learning by giving putting a different lens on your practice, which is the way of becoming still at the beginning, watching it, then becoming still at the end, and then talking about how stillness occurs in relationship to some of the afternoon philosophy classes, because the impact and the way that we understand yoga, right, you and I and our colleagues, is it has this deep, profound a way of like changing your outlook, changing the essence of who you are without changing who you are, right? Becoming, and
mm,
so for me, for me, I think even years ago, even on the old Stillpoint website, after Oz died, I was like, you know what? This isn't about yoga poses.
mhm,
Yes, we teach yoga poses. And yes, over the many years, yoga poses have been the way in, like in like, Singleton's book, right? He talks about how yoga became massive because of the printed image.
yes,
And now we have Instagram, and now you have like this kind of interesting now take on yoga influenced by calisthenics and movement, and that's because of Instagram. Because like
yeah,
suddenly now you have everyone sharing how they do things, and it becomes so suddenly we've got a story on yoga which is influenced by, which is a good thing, because we're finding new ways of understanding movement, which are kind of getting away from that old view of the structured alignment principles. There's a more
yeah,
nuanced approach to understanding it. But still, I remember going, but that's not what this room is about. This people walk into this
mm,
room and go, I like the feel of it. And I said, and I've always been, how can I project? It's always been my creative like challenge. How can I present a way of yoga that people get a sense of it without going, here's me doing a pose, or here's a pose.
Mm-hmm.
Can you get a sense of it by reading the words, by looking at the pictures of, where people looking a certain way, connection between people, the way that their hand is resting on someone's back in a picture of an adjustment or like touch. And for me, that's been a far more, I don't know, richer way of trying to explore the expression of yoga. Like that post is like, this is how it's moved me. This is how yoga has moved me. It's not saying this is what Ashtanga yoga is. This is what Ashtanga yoga is, what I think it is at this point in time. But this is how it moves me, and this is how I find Ashtanga yoga gets me to a place of stillness where I'm not kind of like fighting. At every point, I come back to a place of stillness so I can meet the next pose. So I've always been fascinated in. And it just, that post just came from like looking at someone on another post who said, here's a way of like, you got to get people in the first 5 seconds. Just put a big thing on the front that says something, and then they'll watch to the end.
Clickbait. This is how it works. Yeah.
1,200 likes later, like.
Yeah. 3 hacks to samadhi through Ashtanga yoga.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, it's about expression. And for me, it's like, I've never wanted to be obvious.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of brings me quite nicely to one of the other things I wanted to pick up on. One of the other strands is, you've talked a lot about words and language and how important they are to you and using them creatively. And I've heard you say many times and write many times now that Ashtanga yoga can move us deeply. And I wondered if you'd talk a little bit more about what you mean there. Especially in terms of, I've heard you talk a lot about intimacy and relationship within the practice. So relationship with ourselves and with our teacher and with everyone else. But also I've heard you talk about the space between us. So maybe tell us a little bit more about that.
I mean, if we look at like, if you're intimacy and relationship are kind of very closely linked. To be intimate with something, you have to have a relationship with it. And so one of the most beautiful expressions I've heard someone use when they translate yoga, even though it's not traditional, but is this word intimacy. And it was Michael Stone. And when he explained that, like when I first got into his work 12 years ago now, it was this kind of understanding that in every moment you're in intimate relationship with that moment and everything within it. And so at the heart of Ashtanga yoga, at the heart of all yoga, is this presence of is coming to this presence within this moment and noticing it. And in this presence of this moment right now is my breath moving in and out. And my breath, or my inhalation, is creating a lifting quality in me. My exhalation is creating a contracting, like letting go quality in me. And if I become quiet, if I let go of going, I've got to shake my arms up and follow the Surya Namaskars. If I listen for that movement, that is the movement that I'm wanting to harness at the heart of all Vinyasa yoga. That movement is the baseline of the way that my whole body expresses itself through the inhalation pattern, and my whole body expresses itself through the exhalation pattern and the spaces in between that inhalation and exhalation pattern. So I think, it was Richard Freeman who's given the best line in any yoga book ever. Yoga is about listening. And
Yeah.
you're not listening with your ears, you're listening with the wider sense of the felt sense. My old teacher, Lucy, used to talk to us so much about the felt sense, which is like the way the senses occur when they come together, and then you're feeling something far deeper and you're moving from there. So what we're trying to get to do, the beautiful thing about Ashtanga yoga is it is this kind of thing we do over and over again so that we can forget about it.
Yeah.
And then we can just become experienced to the movement and the presence of this felt sense through the vinyasas and through the postures, so that we can breathe fully, move fully, release fully, and then it becomes about the experience of movement and stillness and presence rather than how the posture's looking in a certain shape. So it becomes far more embodied. And myself as a teacher is trying to understand that, well, for me as a teacher, I'm wanting a practitioner to be able to notice that at its heart. If you notice the way that that expression of movement is happening within you and you're breathing from there, the body finds its alignment. Where no matter what kind of practitioner, whether you have tight hamstrings or not, whether you have long hamstrings, you're trying to find this kind of balance of integrity through the whole body, where the body is being breathed and the alignment is being found through the quality of that breath. So what I'm trying, the intimate relationship, the relational element is the way that I feel my body in space. You can feel when you're out of alignment. And you and I can feel when we're out of alignment because we've practiced long enough for us to be able to go, I need to move that there. That doesn't feel right. If I just move there, that feels better. Right.
Yeah.
And then, but someone new hasn't got that kind of sensitivity yet.
Yeah.
So what Ashtanga yoga is trying to do is to create a deeper sense of sensitivity as we practice it more, to be able to feel what happens, to find internal alignment so that we can get this sense of the breath expressing itself as movement within us. Because when we find the poses and we're aligned in the poses, there's a sense of ease. There's a sense of like the breath moves the body. And this is the point.
Yeah.
So when I teach Surya Namaskar, I get people to not raise the arms up first, but feel the expression of the spine extending, the breath moving that, and then reaching the arms. So you're following like a path.
Yeah.
And so the space between us is like, again, like, so understanding the space between us is understanding that even that you and I are having a relational experience right now.
Yeah.
You're there in Glasgow. I'm here in Tenerife. We're having this conversation, but there's a space between us. And what I'm trying to do to have the best conversation I can with you is to really listen to what you're saying. So then if I listen to what you're saying, and within that space, I can then kind of like observe the best answer I could give or the best thing I can share that helps. And so I understand the memo. There's you, there's me, there's this space. We're tied into this idea of having a conversation and having the best conversation we can have. But for me to do that, I have to really listen and understand what's on play here. And this is the same when we're kind of working with in the yoga room, when there's two people, there's someone practicing and there's me, the teacher. And that is a relationship of, for me, understanding what's really going on. And what's really going on is someone, the person is on their mat having an experience about trying to find sensation, breath, and movement. And then what is my role in that experience? What am I there to do? And when I say we're like the space in between is yoga, is because I'm having to assess where I am in that space, within that space. And I could just go in and go, you do it, lift here, all like that. Mm-hmm. But if I can do that, but if I do that, that's me jumping on and going like, this is what I want you to do. Rather than me stepping back and going there's you who's doing it, there's me who's watching you doing it. Within that space is the moment of connection. And the more I've taught, the more I've seen how important that space is when we're dealing with trust, when we're dealing with teaching, when we're dealing with the ability to help someone and encourage someone and give someone like and move someone and give someone a cue or an assessment or adjustment. I, as a teacher, have to understand my own bias and go, what's present here? And for me, that's helped. Once I saw that, I'm like, this is where the real power is. It's not me going in; it's me stepping back and going, what exists? There's a person doing it, and there's me observing the person doing it. But how am I observing it? And if I can get out of my way of observing it, I can observe something a little bit differently. I can observe maybe they look like they're feeling a certain way. Maybe they're unsteady. And there's a reason that they're unsteady. There's always this kind of, as a teacher, there's more and more a nuanced way of being able to approach people and to connect people. It isn't about power, but it's about companionship. It's about, we as teachers we're on a journey together with the practitioner or the student because it's a collaboration. Does that make sense? So it's really really sitting back and going, when we look at something in relation, what's really going on here? There's that person, there's me. In the old style, like I'd be the one with the power who tell you to do what you do, but we're kind of not those teachers like anymore. There are still maybe those teachers and people like that, but we're more like what exists when we come together and we see. And I step back and I go, what's really going on here? And I say to youth, can I help you? And they say yes. Within that space comes alive the expression of that person's posture or sensation or feeling or whatever happens. So I think for me, the ability to slow down, the ability to kind of move and try and understand and watch has been really helpful. But watch more like you watch people without trying to fix anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the space does is it invites communication, conversation, and I don't mean just talking.
No.
Like there's an invitation in that space. So I'm very conscious of time, Scott, and I don't want to eat into your rest time.
It's all good.
So as we start to wrap up, we're talking ahead of you coming to Glasgow for your annual visit now, a weekend intensive. And in the description that you sent me, you talk about Primary Series having at its core this exploration of the body's patterns. And I wondered if maybe you could say a little bit more specifically about that before we finish up.
I mean, we want to see if you look at an asana, at its nature, it's a pattern. And then if you look at all of the vinyasas, they're patterns, and you do that pattern. There's a patterning going on. You know, it's like the basically like the idea of a krama or leading towards a kind of peak pose, if you will, in hatha yoga, would be creating a pattern so that when you got to the peak pose, you're in the best way, you create the best pattern to be able to achieve it. And so The primary series, all of the sequencing, all the way through, it's such a stunning system. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a stunning system when you understand the pattern of it, but you understand the pattern of it in relation to your own unique movement and physical patterning.
Yeah.
So there's the pattern of Ashtanga yoga, the pattern of the primary series, there's the pattern of the intermediate series, and then there's your body.
Yeah.
And our job as teachers is to go, here's the pattern, here's how this pattern works, here's how you can see the kind of movement. And then here's your body, which kind of like, if you look at all the pictures, there's the perfect people, all the people who've got their kind of like videos or their kind of like charts of doing it so beautifully, like, and they're presenting it in a way for the dominant, most people don't
Yeah.
don't get it. They're presenting a view of the pose, which is like the final form, except there is never a final form of a pose. There is only the deeper sensation of the feeling of a pose. There's a way something looks, but it's never perfected. It's only because you're experiencing in that moment, in a way, in that moment, right? So when we talk about the perfection of a yoga pose, it's kind of like subjective, because I always think about you. We're always just observing what comes up when we put ourselves in something called a yoga pose, and then we let it go. So there's the pattern of the primary, the pattern of the sequence nature, but then there's the patterns of your own body, which is your unique history. You know, our friend and teacher David Kyle is such as the genius at this kind of way of expressing the historical, all of the ways you present at that moment on a yoga mat and say, I'm going to practice Ashtanga. And I can't do this pose, I can't do that. There's all these things that come up, and all the time, even here, we're undoing patterns of movement which are which are inherited or habitual, and you're saying it's because you've got this pattern going on in your body. If you let go of this pattern, then this pattern starts to happen. And so you have the inherent natural patterns of people's tensions, their weaknesses, their strengths, their all of the things, their kind of psychology, and then you're putting it in and saying, now we're going to follow this form.
Yeah.
And as both you and I, having teachers like David Kyle over the years, you know that it's never just, oh, we're just going to do it.
No.
We're looking and going, how does that work for you here right now with what you're presenting? With like a discomfort in a knee, or this feeling or tightness in the hip, or like something there. What is the story? What is that? What is that? And what is that that's coming up? So when we look at the patterns, we're looking at how everyone's individual patterns work in relationship to the presentation of Ashtanga yoga as the sequence of patterns. Does that make sense? And so this is when I do my
I've said
workshop,
it better. Yep.
I can never say this is the way you do it. I can give a very vague generalization saying here's a general kind of idea about how a pose works, but until we get into the Mysore room, or until we get into your particular body, we'll have to see if that holds true, because there will be a nuanced approach that you need to do in relationship to that generalization of an alignment that your body is presenting. It's the biggest thing I've learned over like all of the years of teaching, is that not everyone has unique movement patterns, and that they present differently when they're practicing primary series or intermediate series. And we're adjusting them. And again, the most amazing thing that I've ever been taught is, again, by David, like, you're adjusting people's anatomy, not their poses.
Yeah.
You're adjusting people's unique patterns, not to a perfect pose. And so what we'll do in the workshop is look at how the presentation of the sequence works, but then the presentation of your unique approach to that sequence works for you in relationship to the sequence. And the things that you then need to look at to be able to keep yourself spacious, strong, out of harm, not without pain. If you have pain, be in less pain. All of those things. I love like people coming with all of their stuff, because then it helps to kind of like unpack it and say, can you practice as best as you can without being troubled by your pattern? To say your patterns are perfect and unique, here's a way to practice Ashtanga yoga with how your body's presenting, rather than like so many people being told, no, you can't do it.
And that, my friends, is how Ashtanga works.
That's how Ashtanga works.
So I think that's the perfect place to finish. Can't wait to have all of
Oh my
our
goodness, it's my favourite place to come.
our
It's my
unique
favourite place
patterns
to
in the room with you. Yeah.
Coming
Can't
and
wait.
coming to Glasgow is like a long-term love affair.
Good. And just bring some of that Tenerife weather with you, please. Pop it into your suitcase.
I will.
Keep it warm. Thank you so much, Scott.
It's
See you
an absolute
soon.
pleasure. Anytime, Judy. See you soon.
Scott and I are chatting ahead of his next visit to Merchant City Yoga, Friday the 7th to Sunday the 9th of March 2025. He's sharing 3 mornings of Mysore-style assisted self-practice, workshops exploring mindful patterns in Ashtanga yoga on Saturday and Sunday afternoon, and a very special workshop for teachers on the Friday, The Art of Mindful Yoga Adjustments, empowering teachers through safe and effective hands-on assists. You'll find all the details and booking on the workshops page of the website, merchantcityyoga.com. Now, as always, these conversations are unedited, but I'd like to shout out Steph Northcote for smoothing out the wrinkles at the beginning and end of every episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. You can even follow, rate and review to help other people find me too. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.